Hi, this is Brian Wicklund with Garfinkel Schwartz. I'm coming to you today from our Titusville, Florida office, which is on the Space Coast of Florida. We also have offices in Maitland, Florida, but we also travel across the country and help people in need all across the country. Today, I'd like to talk to you about a very serious medical issue. Although I'm not a doctor, I do see a lot of people, a lot of civilian contractors that are involved in bomb blasts and concussive type situations where they fall out of helicopters or they fall and hit their heads, or they're involved in like gunfire type situations and any type of concussion type syndrome that they could get that involves their brain. And the problem with this issue is that it's not addressed by the insurance companies, and they refuse to give you proper testing to determine whether you have what is called traumatic brain injury. It's a new kind of situation phenomenon that's being researched by the VA. It affects my clients, it affects civilian contractors just as it does the military. And what it basically is when I say traumatic brain injury, or TBI, they call it, the symptoms that you have involving a concussive type syndrome are things that can go away in terms of certain situations, but can stay with you forever in other certain situations. The people that I see that are really affected by traumatic brain injury are people that are involved in IED explosions, or they're basically concussed and they hit their heads on the concrete or some hard surface. They may or may not have been unconscious. They may or may not have had a massive concussion. That's not the point. The point is, at some point in time, when things like that happen, sometimes your brain can be affected, and it can be affected permanently. And what I mean by that is, I see people with symptoms of migraine headaches that they've never had before that don't go away. And when they get treatment for those migraine headaches, they just simply get medication. They don't get the testing, the specialized testing that they should be getting to determine whether they have traumatic brain injury. Another type of very common symptom with traumatic brain injury is lack of concentration, can't focus, jitters, problems focusing with your eyesight in terms of lightheadedness when too much light comes into your eyes. Also faint issues of hearing that can be magnified to a giant degree. The biggest problem when it comes to being treated for other injuries is that the way that it was described to me by one of the civilian contractors that I've been dealing with is that if you pinprick my finger, I feel a pinch of the pinprick. If you pinprick his finger, it's about 100 times more painful to him because of traumatic brain injury as it would be to a normal person. What this means is, you may have a back injury, you may get MRIs, you may get x-rays. Their doctors, the insurance company's doctors, will say there's nothing wrong with you, you should be walking around, what's wrong with you? Well, if you have TBI, any little type of pain, even if you sleep badly after your back injury, could be magnified to such a degree that you can't move, you can't walk, you can't get out of bed. And there's no medical test to provide for that, because the messages in your body are coming from your brain and not necessarily from the actual pain sensors in your back. And that's back behind the brain. Like I said, I'm not a doctor. I don't understand the intricacies of that. But what that is there are misdiagnoses everywhere with people with traumatic brain injuries that are not diagnosed because the tests come back negative, and they say that, why are you doing this? You must be faking it. Well, you're not faking it because you haven't gotten the appropriate MRI testing and the various other testing and screening procedures that you should be given to determine whether or not you have traumatic brain injury after any type of concussive syndrome to your head, a fall, a bomb blast, anything that could have caused damage to your brain. Sometimes these things are mild, and a lot of times these things are very not mild, and they last potentially for the rest of your life if you don't get treatment for it. So what I urge you to do is get an attorney, even if it's not me, right off the bat. If you think you had a concussion or you hit your head and you're suffering from symptoms like dizziness and terrible headaches that you've never had before, or pains and sensations that you shouldn't really feel like you should be having, you have to get to a lawyer like me to get you to the correct doctor to get the correct type of testing that's going to be done, because the insurance companies refuse to allow this testing to happen, and they don't want it to happen. They don't want to know whether or not you're suffering from a traumatic brain injury. So this is, again, Brian Wickland signing off from the Titusville, Florida office of Garfinkel Schwartz. I hope to be of your service. Thank you very much.